Hello there and welcome to World News Program, streaming to you live on All 24 News. I'm your host, Greenford Zachary, and up next are the top stories. On the 136th day of Zionist aggression against Gaza, and in just 24 hours, 9 massacres perpetrated by the Zionist occupation killed 107 Palestinians and dozens more have been reported injured in the attacks. Also coming up, the International Court of Justice opens hearings on the consequences of Zionist occupation of Palestine. Palestinian government demands an end to the double standards and vows to put entire Zionist regime on trial, as well as push for permanent ceasefire. Also coming up, the UN warns of dire humanitarian consequences if the Zionist military operation in Rafah continues. China urges the entity to halt aggression in Rafah, and a shocking UN report reveals the occupation's deliberate targeting of Gaza's women and children. And Algeria emphasizes the urgent need for African support on the Palestinian issue and urges Africans to contribute to international diplomatic efforts for Palestine. Meanwhile, the European Union calls for measures to punish Zionist settlers. Stay tuned for the details after the break. Hello again and welcome to the details. First off in our news, and in the last 24 hours, the Zionist forces conducted 9 massacres in Gaza, resulting in 107 deaths and 205 injuries since October. The death toll reached 29,092, with 69,028 injured. Attacks intensified in Gaza's Az-Zaytun neighborhood, with airstrikes causing more casualties. 6 homes were bombed, resulting in 10 deaths. Bombardments in Rafah also continued, causing further casualties as gunboats targeted displaced people's tents. The International Court of Justice in The Hague began public hearings on Monday regarding the legal consequences of Zionist policies in occupied Palestinian territories. 52 countries, along with the African Union, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and League of Arab States, provided briefings during the 6-day session. Zara Farjani narrates the story.
The United Nations Top Court opened on Monday its historic hearing, delving into the legality of the Zionist occupation of Palestinian territories dating back to 1967. At the start of the hearing, the Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki demanded an immediate end to Israel's occupation of the West Bank and East al-Quds, urging the court to declare the occupation illegal and end it immediately and unconditionally.
The only solution consistent with international law is for this illegal occupation to come to an immediate, unconditional, and total end. As you affirmed 20 years ago, the Palestinian people have the right to self-determination. It is an erga omnes right. It is non-negotiable, non-derogable. No occupying power, including Israel, can be granted a perpetual veto over the rights of the people it occupies.
The UN Palestinian representative at the International Court of Justice, Riyad Mansour, emphasized that the Palestinian right to self-determination is not up for negotiation, but rather a fundamental right.
Mr. President, members of the court, based on the UN record, you should have no difficulty arriving at the conclusion that the occupation is prolonged, that Palestinian territory has been annexed, that our self-determination has been denied, and that the people of Palestine have been subjected to systematic racial discrimination.
Throughout the proceedings, international lawyers advocating for Palestine highlighted the ongoing annexation of Palestinian territory and Zionist sovereignty over it, which flouts international laws prohibiting the acquisition of land through force.
The best and possibly the last hope for the two-state solution that is so vital to the needs of both peoples is for the court to declare illegal the main obstacle to that solution, the ongoing Israeli occupation of Palestine, and for it to pronounce in the clearest possible terms that international law requires that this entire illegal enterprise be terminated completely, unconditionally, and immediately.
In response, the Zionist occupation dismissed the legitimacy of the hearings, alleging they were orchestrated to undermine their right to self-defense against existential threats. This claim, however, is repeatedly used by the Zionist entity to evade accountability for their brutal actions, aggressive tactics, and unlawful settlement expansions. Despite international condemnations, the occupation forces persist in killing hundreds of innocent Palestinians every day under the name of self-defense.
Similarly, Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki accused the Zionist entity of apartheid and urged the UN's top court to declare the occupation of Palestinian lands illegal, demanding immediate and unconditional ceasefire for any hope of a two-state solution. Addressing the International Court of Justice in The Hague, he praised the historic hearings, calling them a trial for the entire Zionist regime. Al-Maliki commended global participation, stressing the court's declaration mandates action for Palestinian self-determination. He also emphasized efforts for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza and aid delivery to residents.
The best outcome of this case is that, the court comes out openly and declares that, Israeli occupation is illegal and that Israel has to end its occupation, that, such occupation has transformed itself into a system of colonization and also in a system of apartheid. The existence of this illegal colonial occupation and apartheid regime is a source of all its ills our people are suffering. Any formula that does not deal with that root cause is planting the seeds for more tragedy and aiding Israel in keeping the Palestinian people captive to its colonial agenda and illegal actions. The deliberations today are long overdue. For the Palestinian people, no less than their survival and future are at stake.
And on the same occasion, demonstrators gathered outside the International Court of Justice in The Hague, demanding justice for Palestine as hearings began on the legal consequences of the Zionist entity's practices in occupied Palestinian territories. The protesters called for an end to the genocide, occupation, and freedom for Palestine.
It is necessary for stronger actions to be taken, for stronger stances to be taken against Israel by all the different governments, by the European countries, by the West, by all countries in the world. We are seeing some countries standing up and start to do some things, but definitely nowhere near enough given the severity of what's been going on.
Our government is supporting Zionism, is supporting apartheid, is supporting genocide against our will. This is shameful. But we say, and I say as a German citizen, not in my name. I demand a ceasefire right now in the name of German people. This cannot go on like that.
The UN Coordinator for Humanitarian Affairs in Gaza, Sigrid Kaag, warns of dire consequences from Zionist aggression in Rafah, southern Gaza. She highlights catastrophic conditions for displaced people and obstruction of aid delivery. Kaag issued the warning during a meeting with EU foreign ministers in Brussels discussing support for UNRWA.
The United Nations has been very clear that currently an extension of military operation in Rafah will have very dire humanitarian consequences for the innocent civilians that are there. At the same time, we hear very clearly, of course, the different voices from the Israeli War Cabinet, their intent to proceed. The timing seems to be a matter of discussion.
And in other international reactions, China urges the Zionist entity to halt its military operations in Rafah, southern Gaza, to prevent further humanitarian deterioration. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning stated in a press conference in Beijing that China opposes and condemns any actions harming civilians or violating international law.
China is closely following the situation in Rafah. We oppose and condemn acts to harm civilians and violate international law. We urge Israel to stop its military operations there as soon as possible and try its best to avoid death and injuries of innocent civilians and avert an even worse humanitarian disaster in Rafah.
UN experts expressed concern over reported violations against Palestinian women in Gaza and the West Bank since October 7th. They cite extrajudicial killings, deliberate targeting by the Zionist entity, and incidents of threats, rape, and sexual violence.
We were shocked by reports of deliberate targeting and killing Palestinian women and children in places where they have taken refuge or while fleeing. Some of them were reportedly carrying white pieces of cloth when they were killed by Israeli forces or its affiliated forces.
In Khan Yunis, Gaza, Dr. Ahmed Al-Maghrabi from Nasser Medical Complex documented the horror after an airstrike hit the third floor. Occupation forces targeted the orthopedic department, forcing staff to leave with dogs after stripping them from their clothes. The Palestinian Ministry of Health confirmed arrest of medical staff, converting the complex into a military barracks. The United Nations for its part, or the United Nations Office for Humanitarian Affairs, condemned the targeting of hospitals, schools, and shelters, emphasizing the need to protect civilians and humanitarian workers.
At 1:30, I was at the third floor with my family at the surgical building. We heard lots of quadcopters over our heads at the hospital. They were asking us by microphone actually to evacuate the hospital immediately. And after like 5-10 minutes, I heard a very big explosion. Actually, they bombed and chilling the third floor where I'm staying. Exactly, they targeted the orthopedic department, and I took my phone. I recorded some couple of videos and I posted on my Instagram.
Algeria stressed the urgent need for African support on the Palestinian issue, calling it one of its most critical historical phases. Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf at the 27th African Summit in Addis Ababa highlighted Zionist efforts to dismantle the Palestinian national project. Algeria urged African nations to join diplomatic efforts to halt Zionist aggression in Gaza, challenge its unjust immunity, and establish a Palestinian state with its capital in Al-Quds al-Sharif based on the 1967 borders.
إن القضية الفلسطينية أحوج ما تكون اليوم.
The Palestinian cause urgently needs, today more than ever, the support of our continent, as it is going through one of the most critical periods in its history. The Zionist occupation is accelerating the implementation of its plan to liquidate the Palestinian national project, bury the two-state solution, and revive the Israeli project.
ووقت حل الدولتين وإحياء مشروع إسرائيل الكبرى. ومن هذا المنظور تدعو الجزائر.
From this platform, Algeria urges all its African brothers gathered under the auspices of our organization to contribute to international diplomatic efforts on three main levels. The first level involves urgent priorities, including taking action to halt the Zionist aggression against the Gaza Strip, protecting civilians, and ensuring the delivery of humanitarian aid to our brothers in Gaza without any conditions, restrictions, or impediments. As for the second level of priorities aimed at breaking the unjustly granted immunity to the Israeli occupier, my country is currently working in total coordination with the Republic of South Africa, a brotherly nation, to activate the provisional measures decided by the International Court of Justice. We're striving for the adoption of binding resolution by the United Nations Security Council during this period. The third level of priorities involves the establishment of the State of Palestine with borders of 1967, with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital. Algeria calls on all its brotherly African states to prepare for the next step, which is to take the initiative to propose the candidacy of the State of Palestine as a full-fledged member to the relevant UN bodies dealing with this historic issue.
The European Union's foreign policy official emphasized the necessity for EU countries to implement punitive measures against settlers engaged in violent attacks against Palestinians in the West Bank. Borrell labeled such violence as tantamount to terrorism, echoing European sentiments. Borrell made these remarks during a meeting of European Union foreign ministers in Brussels on Monday.
We have to talk about the war in Gaza, but don't forget what's happening in the West Bank, where the violence against the shelters continue. I am proposing member states to take actions to sanction the violent shelters, which are taking what we can do terrorist action against the Palestinian people in the West Bank. And we are still not there. They are still not there. I don't still have the agreement of all member states, but I will continue pushing, because if we want to keep our credibility, we have to denounce what's happening in the West Bank.
And while the international community is condemning what is happening in the West Bank and Gaza, for weeks now, Palestinians in northern Gaza have been facing severe hunger as the Zionist occupation denies them humanitarian and food aid. Many are resorting to even using livestock feed for meals and bread due to the deprivation enforced by the occupation. Here's Salman Asib with the story.
The stories of hunger emerging from the war-ravaged Gaza Strip are absolutely horrendous. Palestinians are scraping by, resorting to using cattle feed just to make flour, as relentless Zionist bombings have laid waste to everything on its way: homes, bakeries, and even grocery stores. There is no doubt the Zionist occupation is using starvation as a war tactic, making it impossible for Gazans to access the food they need. Down in Rafah, right on the border with Egypt, thousands upon thousands of displaced Palestinians are huddled together, fearing an imminent Zionist ground invasion. They're all struggling with scarce food, terrible sanitation, and sickness spreading like wildfire.
There are fears that a catastrophe will happen in case of Israeli ground offensive. The occupation's crimes will be different because the biggest number of people is in Rafah. It is a small geographical area. Crowds are huge. When they strike, they will hit people. There are normal and unarmed citizens who have nothing to do either left or right. What is their fault?
Over in Gaza City, it's no better. Palestinians are scrambling to get their hands on sacks of flour from a UN-run distribution center. This has been going on for weeks now, with people up north resorting to livestock feed just to put some bread on a table.
Because we want to eat. We are dying of hunger. Why would someone put himself at risk of dying by coming here? It's in order to feed the children. We are dying of hunger and there is no food or drink left in Gaza. There is a famine. Why does 1 kilogram of rice cost 70 new Israeli shekel? In the black market here, there is no flour. We are eating animal feed to stop ourselves from feeling the hunger.
Rockets are not the only killer raining down on the Gaza Strip these days. The occupation is systematically starving the Palestinians. According to experts, over 2 million Gazans are facing acute food insecurity, with vital infrastructure for food production obliterated by bombings. It's a dire situation, with no end in sight.
And in other news, Houthi forces targeted a British ship in the Gulf of Aden with missiles, causing it to halt. Houthi spokesman Yahya Sari' posted a video on Telegram stating the ship suffered severe damage, but the crew was safely evacuated. Sari' also announced the downing of an American drone in Hodeidah, accusing it of hostile actions on behalf of the Zionist entity.
In support of the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip who are still facing aggression and blockade to this moment, And as a response to the American-British aggression on our country, the naval forces of the Yemeni armed forces, with the help of Allah Almighty, carried out a special military operation targeting a British ship in the Gulf of Aden, Rubimar, using appropriate naval missiles. The results of the operation were as follows. The ship was severely damaged, leading to its complete halt. Due to the significant damage suffered by the ship, it is now at risk of sinking in the Gulf of Aden. We took care during the operation to ensure the safe evacuation of the ship's crew.
Qatari Minister of Energy and CEO of Qatar energy company Saad Al-Kaabi voiced concern over ongoing shipping disruptions in the Red Sea. He emphasized that tensions in the Middle East would hinder product deliveries to customers in the long term, increasing transfer costs and durations significantly impacting global trade. Al-Kaabi stressed that stopping Zionist aggression against Gaza is the only solution to the issue. And in other news, Western media reported that the African Union has permanently revoked the observer member status granted to the Zionist entity. This move, reported by Le Monde, marks the expulsion of the occupation from the continental body after persistent efforts by the Zionist entity to gain influence. Algeria and South Africa played key roles in supporting this decision, having confronted Zionist attempts to infiltrate the African Union. Algeria expressed its readiness to lead the African peer evaluation mechanism and its pride in President Abdelmajid Tebboun's leadership over the next 2 years. Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf highlighted the importance of African peer evaluation mechanism in strengthening the democratic values and good governance in Africa. Algerian Foreign Minister also emphasized that Algeria's mandate will focus on promoting dialogue, consultation and coordination among all relevant parties to develop African solutions for African issues.
ستكرس الجزائر عهدتها لتشجيع وتكثيف الحوار.
Algeria will dedicate its mandate to encourage and intensifying dialogue, consultation and coordination among all active parties to crystallizing African solutions to the African problems. These solutions will emanate from the African reality and consider the external environment surrounding us. They aim first and foremost to enhance peace, security, political stability, and promote economic development and shared prosperity across our continent.
التنمية الاقتصادية والرخاء المشترك في ربوع قارتنا.
And in other international news, the Libyan Presidential Council highlighted the importance of the upcoming National Reconciliation Conference in achieving political and security stability. Council head Mohammed Al-Menfi urged all Libyan parties to participate to fulfill the people's aspirations, stressing the fragility of the agreement without comprehensive national reconciliation. He spoke during discussions on the African Union's report on Libya. Catriona Lang, head of the United Nations Assistance Mission in Somalia, stated that combating the terrorist group Al-Shabaab is a key priority for Somali government. Lang also commended the progress made in establishing stability in recently recovered areas. This was conveyed during a briefing at the UN Security Council's open session on Monday, followed by closed consultations on Somalia's political, economic, and security developments. More stories making headlines around the globe in the News in Brief.
Somali forces have thwarted an attempted attack by Al-Shabaab in the central region of the country, eliminating 4 militants. The army's successful defense inflicted significant losses on the terrorist group, as reported by local media. The government has recently escalated military operations against Al-Shabaab, reclaiming multiple central regions from the militants in recent months.
Sahrawi political detainees in Moroccan prisons are facing mistreatment, including verbal abuse and theft of personal items, according to a statement by a committee of families and companions of political detainees. The committee calls on Moroccan prisons authorities to stop discriminatory practices and uphold the detainees' fundamental rights, as per international agreements.
Tractor marches have returned to the streets as farmers gear up for the agriculture exhibition in Paris this Saturday. In Bouches-du-Rhône, convoys have gathered in Marseille and entered the city on Monday morning. despite government reassurances in late January that led to the removal of blockades nationwide. Farmers continue to express dissatisfaction, citing delays in meeting executive commitments.
In Cape Town on February 18th, the Palestinian national soccer team secured a 1-0 victory against the South African Invitational 11th amid a show of solidarity. The charity match named Football for Humanity donated significant portion of its proceeds from ticket sales and online streaming to humanitarian work in Gaza. The Palestinian soccer chief praised the event as a creative display of solidarity, highlighting its positive impact on supporting humanitarian initiatives in conflict zones.
The end of our program. Thank you for watching and take care.